Hello, and welcome to Season 10, Episode 9 of the Ubuntu Podcast. It's Tuesday, the 2nd of May, and we're going to be discussing what's been happening in the news and in the community. I'm Alan, and joining me this week is Mark.
Hello.
Hello. Martin.
Hello, are you alright?
Feeling a bit weird. And our wonderful guest presenter, Joey. Hello, Joey.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. I hope everyone is well too.
Good. Well, everyone? Yeah. Gosh, you're very giving.
All of them.
So, we'll come back to you in just 1 second. Mark, what have you been doing?
I have been teaching kids to program using the BBC Microbit.
Ooh.
Yeah. So this, there's a local charity near where I live called Science Oxford. And one of the things that they do is a lot of educational outreach. So they go into schools, and they also run a computing club at weekends. And the course they're doing at the moment is all based around learning to program the BBC Microbit in MicroPython.
Huh.
So I went along to sort of assist at one of the sessions, well, a couple of the sessions actually.
How does that work? Do you program on a computer and then send it down a cable or something?
Yes. So there's a few ways you can do it, but the way we were doing it was we had the microbit connected to a netbook with just a USB cable. And then there's a little sort of IDE called Mu, where you type in your code and then you press flash and it sends it down the cable and loads it onto the microbit, and then it just executes it. And then when it gets to the end of the program, there's a reset button on the back which you can push to run the code from the top again, basically.
And these are the things that have got like a 5x5 grid of LEDs on, and they've got a few sensors. Yeah, and that's it, basically. Oh, and connectors on the bottom as well.
Exactly. So I was always a bit sort of skeptical about how useful these actually were, but having seen them and seen what the MicroPython API has and how you can connect it up to other stuff, it's actually really cool. So you've got the 5x5 display, but you've got an API for it so that you can send it any text which will scroll across, or you can it's got a load of preset images like happy faces or sad faces. It's also got what we were doing. The main sort of focus of the lessons, we were plugging it into an edge connector and then connecting that up to a speaker on the breadboard, and then doing text to speech. So it's got text to speech engine built in. So you can just, give it speech. And we were doing a sort of a question answer machine where you could use the buttons to say yes or no to questions, and it would give you an appropriate response. You can get it to play music. So it's got a few sort of pre-programmed things, like it's got Ode to Joy, and it's got the Nyan Cat music, but it's also got that you can also just do individual notes and get it to play them.
Sorry, the what cat music?
The Nyan Cat.
Okay.
NYAN.cat. You go there and send your hate mail to
Not
Mark.
right now.
Okay. Yeah. And did they enjoy this?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's each one of the people that sort of had their own take on it and doing different kinds of things, and there are a few doing sort of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy references in their questions, and a few people who were a bit bored of it all, I think. But no, it was quite good. Like seeing, we had this sort of basic thing up on the slides with here's how to do a loop and here's how to do an if statement, and then they were just letting their imaginations run away with it. It was really cool to see.
Awesome.
Yeah, but yeah, so I'm actually now a lot more enthusiastic about the microbits than I was before.
Is the connector thing that you said on the bottom, is this like a big black wide connector with lots and lots and lots of pins?
Kind of. It reminded me of something. I'm trying to think of what it is. But it's basically, you basically plug the microbit in sort of sideways, and then it's got like the GPIO pins on a Raspberry Pi, right, and that's the whole board, and then you sort of breadboard out from there.
Ah, sweet.
Yeah.
Sounds like fun. So Joey is Joey from OMG Ubuntu, and that's what your name is, your full name. It's that's
OMG Joey, right?
Yeah, that's what everyone knows you as. So what have you been up to recently?
I have been getting my knees muddy down the rabbit hole that is GNOME Shell. I've been I've been going pretty mad trying out lots of different extensions from the GNOME extensions website. I'm going to keep calling it GNOME by accident because that's how I do it in my head.
I don't
That's
care.
fine. That's how I say it.
I don't care how you say it. I know what a GNOME is and I know what a GNOME is, and they're both the same thing. So I
didn't used to care until I got involved in a project that has a particular pronunciation. So now I try and pronounce everything properly just to, keep the peace.
I still say mate as well. I'm really sorry.
Yeah, so does Mark Shuttleworth. You're in good company.
So how did you get on with GNOME Shell then, Joey?
Yeah, I'm really, really enjoying my time with GNOME Shell. I've kind of switched, like a lot of people have, following the news about Unity, to kind of see what's what before it's thrust upon me. But yeah, I'm just really enjoying the kind of the Lego-ness of the GNOME Shell desktop. It's very modular, very easy to completely change the workflow dynamic from what you get, which isn't that good by default, to something that's actually a lot better. And
it's funny, I hear that a lot. I hear that theme of the stock GNOME Shell is, it's okay, and it's not impossible to use, but I don't know many people who don't modify it, and there seem to be quite a lot of extensions. Like, I know some people don't like the idea of changing it to look like Unity, and they think that's ludicrous and ridiculous because Unity is the devil. But, there are other extensions that are quite useful. And have you built up your list of top 10 extensions you should install?
I'm kind of forcing myself to not stick with any one particular configuration too much, just to kind of make sure that I'm not settling into kind of the Unity comfort zone. But yeah, I mean, there are some really dominant extensions like Dash to Dock or Dash to Panel, which kind of replicate the desktop environments of other distros and operating systems. But otherwise, yeah. Sorry.
Sorry, I was just going to ask, what version of Ubuntu are you testing this on at the moment?
Ubuntu 17.04.
Right. And this is using Ubuntu GNOME itself to do all of this?
I had a stock Zesty install, which I then installed GNOME on, so I don't have any of the Ubuntu GNOME branding or any of that stuff.
Okay.
Interesting.
And would you have, how much time do you spend looking at the other flavors, typically?
Honestly, not as much.
No, I'm not. I wish I would stop. I'm actually asking a legitimate question. Go on, Joey.
Probably not as much as I should or I would like to. It's very easy to fall into routines, and particularly with Unity was just completely out of the way. I really knew what I was doing with that. But I as part of trying out GNOME Shell, I'm going to make sure that I do try out all the other desktops and flavors as well.
Awesome. Okay, well, we'll talk more to you about OMG Ubuntu related stuff in the next episode, I think. But for now, let's crack on with the rest of the show.
And now it is time for the news. So, Mark, can you tell us some news, please? Ideally not about Microsoft.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm going to disappoint you straight away.
Oh.
So first up in the news, Microsoft has announced Windows 10 and a new Surface laptop.
What does the S mean?
Surface.
Well, that's boring.
Well, they had an announcement which was rife with S's. So Soul, Simplicity, Streamline, Silly, something.
Fair enough.
So this is...
Sorry, it took me far too long to get that.
Surveillance was the word you're after.
That's the word, yeah.
Yes. This has been variously reported as possibly a Chrome OS competitor, but also runs on all Windows-supported hardware and only runs apps from their App Store.
Ooh.
Okay, so quite Chrome-like in that respect then.
Quite Chrome-like in that respect, but it sounds like it's not sort of meant to... It's not like a web browser-based thing. It's all sort of like, by the sound of it, just running natively on Windows like it normally would, but it'll only run stuff which is packaged in the App Store. So you could still run stuff which isn't currently available through the App Store as long as they package it up and release it that way.
Interesting.
It's not...
Right.
Yeah. Yes.
So they've clearly picked up on the fact that the number one laptops on like retail sales at the moment are Chromebooks, and everyone seems to be buying Chromebooks because they're super cheap and disposable, and all your stuff is in the cloud, and if it breaks you just go and buy another one. Are these things priced similarly as Chromebooks?
Well, so the new laptop which has been announced but not actually released yet is the Surface laptop, not the Surface Pro and not the other Surface thing.
Surface
not
Book.
the Surface. Yeah, they're not the Surface Book, the Surface laptop. So this is more. This one's being called more of a MacBook Pro competitor or a Chromebook Pixel competitor. So it's got a 13.5-inch touchscreen, and which is also like a Surface Pen thing, like you get with the other. I think with the Surface Pro. But it's more of a $999 upwards price point than the current Chromebook price point. But it sounds like the idea of the Windows 10S is that it will run on sort of lower end devices as well.
Low end Chromebooks are ARM, and Windows gave up on ARM.
Right.
So
they're going to kickstart that initiative again, though, aren't they?
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, well, we covered it in the news, I think, towards the end of last year, that they're partnering with Qualcomm to deliver some new ARM-based notebooks or something.
But it was something that allowed you to run x86 apps on ARM.
Yeah.
That was funky.
Interesting.
So I suppose the most interesting thing about this is that this is kind of forcing people's hands in that this is an App Store only, an App Store ecosystem device, much like phones and tablets are already.
Yes. Hold on. No, the device isn't App Store only. Windows 10S is App Store only, but you can still run Windows 10 Pro if you want. It comes with Windows 10S by default, but you can upgrade to Windows 10 Pro.
Okay.
For an additional however much.
But if you're running Windows 10S...
Yes.
This sounds very much like the old Windows version that was shipped on like netbooks that had a limit on how many apps you could have open at once, and you couldn't change the desktop background and stuff like that. It's like intentionally limited, yet the software is perfectly capable of doing all these things, but they needlessly limit it to try and drive up sales of the Pro edition.
Isn't this sort of App Store only approach what Gabe Newell was concerned about when they started the whole Steam on Linux business, because they didn't want to find themselves excluded from, the commodity marketplace, because their whole business is games running on PCs.
So it does make me wonder if this is sort of, them testing out to see how people react to it and see how developers react to it, whether, developers are going to be willing to make publishers are going to be willing to make the shift to run on on this platform, and whether they then go more that way with future versions of Windows. If
I ever accidentally open the Microsoft App Store on my Game OS Windows machine, I pretty much close it straight away because it's just full of crud.
Junk.
It really is. There's nothing useful in there at all, I found.
That's obviously going to be a challenge to Windows 10S, because obviously Windows comes with an expectation that you can run all the apps you're used to, your Photoshop and your iTunes and your other browsers. And obviously if they're not available in the App Store, then the users are going to probably give it the same reaction that they gave Windows RT when it launched.
Yeah.
I mean, things like iTunes, are Apple going to put their apps in I don't even know if it's in there. I haven't looked.
But I was wondering, I mean, maybe the wrong words, but are Microsoft trying to strong arm the application publishers to sort of get on board with the Microsoft App Store?
I read earlier that you won't be able to change the default browser on the Windows 10S operating system. You'll be able to install other browsers if they're available in the App Store, but you won't be able to make them the default. So anytime you open a HTML file, it will default to Edge and nothing else, which is a bit... And I think this is the same for the search provider as well. You can't change it in Microsoft Edge in Windows 10S. So that's the Microsoft we all know and love.
Yeah.
I was wondering where they went.
There they are.
They're fitting well.
Wow.
Yeah, and interesting, the new laptop, it's got USB-A and a mini display port and the Surface connector, which is their own proprietary thing.
Of course it is.
But no USB-C. And actually, a lot of the space, I saw a video review earlier, a sort of first impressions thing, and a lot of the space that would be available for ports is actually taken up with the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth antennas.
Right.
On the sides of the device, which they did to make it so they wouldn't have to run them up around the screen, basically.
No
but it
USB-C.
means
that feels
no
like
USB-C.
a bit of an oversight from my point of view.
Yeah, you're the guy who's just gone out and bought a load of USB-C devices. So,
I've also just bought a new laptop that only has USB-C ports on it. So
you're not really in the market for a Windows 10S device?
No,
right.
I'm not at all. No.
Should we move on to happier news?
Oh, please.
There is a security vulnerability in Intel's
happy.
active management technology. Apparently, an attacker may be able to bypass the password that protects the remote management console, called AMT, running on the processor's management engine. So this is stuff that's baked into firmware on lots and lots of machines with Intel CPUs. Not generally software that you've added on top, or software that's been shipped with the OS, but this is stuff that's baked into the silicon firmware. Mm-hmm. And there are potentially lots of devices vulnerable to this, like many devices. The one mitigating factor, though, is some people haven't switched this feature on, this management technology. Mm-hmm. But if they have, then that means they are likely to be vulnerable. There was a nice article written up about this by the Internet's Matthew Garrett, and he answers some of the questions that people are probably worrying about, like, how bad is it? How do I know if I have it enabled? Will it? Are people able to compromise my machine over Wi-Fi and so on? So it's I think a lot of people are think the sky is falling because, it's basically every computer on the planet with an Intel CPU with AMT enabled is potentially vulnerable, and people can come along and own your machine. And interestingly, this is one of those reasons why recently people have been talking about removing tools like this. And we talked about this in previous episode, how people have taken older Lenovo laptops like the X series laptops and used some Heath Robinson, some wires and a bit of soldering and an Arduino to purge these firmware blobs from their laptops so that they're not vulnerable.
And not so old as well now, because last week I saw that the first gen ThinkPad Lenovo Carbon X1 is now Core Boot compatible.
Oh, wow.
So, oh, wow, indeed, yeah. So Richard Stallman will obviously be delighted to hear that. That'll be an upgrade from his X201.
I was interested to see because not every machine is vulnerable, of course, and Intel have published a couple of documents which detail how you discover whether your servers or your desktops or your machines are vulnerable, and they give you multiple methods. Like some of it's software, some of it's checking in various tools that they provide. But method one, which I thought was the best one, was walk around and look for the Intel vPro badge.
So that's an interesting point.
Get up out of your chair, go and have a look at the server.
Actually, when I've been putting orders for computers together in the past, in the fairly recent past, in the last sort of 4 or 5 years, quite often you see an uplift on things like your Wi-Fi and Bluetooth stack, and it often says vPro. And I knew that this AMT was part of that, that bundle. That's effectively what you were buying. And if you're doing, large scale enterprise management, then that can be attractive. And I always used to deliberately not choose the vPro, models of uplift in the specifications.
Well, aren't you the clever one?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I didn't fully appreciate that it was going to eventually be vulnerable one day. But I was aware it was something that we needed to turn off on the machines that came with it.
It's interesting, the blog post that Matt Garrett, lots of questions, and one of them was one of the questions he said was, what do we not know? We have zero information about the vulnerability other than it allows unauthorized access to AMT. So yeah, this is one of the pitfalls of having this big binary blob that runs lower than the operating system, that you just don't know what's going on down there, and it's difficult to know.
Okay. Well, that's all been a bit dreary. Fortunately, it's my turn, and I'm delighted to be able to tell you that Google is going to end of life all Nexus devices. But what?
Hooray!
What's going on now? So this is new information, and I'm affected by this. So this is bad. So Google are going to EOL the 6P and the 6X in September of next year, 2018. But if you have a Nexus 9 or a Nexus 6, they're going to go EOL in September of this year, 2017.
Sorry, there was a typo there. It's 6P and 5X.
6P and 5X. Okay.
Yeah, in September. So there, I mean, you've got, 18 months before they go end of life?
For my devices, I've got a few more months. So I think what I'm going to be doing, I've got the Nexus 9. So I think I'm going to be looking at Lineage and seeing what's going on there these days. But if you've got older devices, such as the Nexus 7 2013, then they've already gone EOL, so your only hope is to put Ubuntu Touch on those.
I mean, is this really a shock? Like, I thought they only supported their devices for like 2 years anyway, which I think my 5X is kind of approaching that.
Right, I think there was always this feeling that Nexus devices were
a cut above,
somewhat blessed,
special
by
in
Google.
some way. Yeah,
and then
but then they stopped making them and said, "Oh, Pixel."
And that's the end of the uplifting news.
And here comes a roundup of community news and events. First up in the community news,
Ubuntu
Joey?
12.04 LTS has reached end of life officially. It's officially dead as of April 28th.
The most depressing Ubuntu podcast ever.
Well, come on. It lived a long and wonderful life as an LTS.
Yes.
It was the first LTS with Unity, wasn't it? If I'm remembering correctly. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it would be, yeah.
So it's kind of sad. I mean, obviously all these things reach the end of their life at some point, and I'm pretty certain no one is probably still running it outside of server users. So, yeah.
I don't know.
We had someone write in just a couple of weeks ago asking how to upgrade from 12.04 to 16.04. Yeah.
I think there's a surprising number of people running 12.04 and 14.04, but 14.04 is less surprising because it's the previous LTS, but 12.04 is probably more surprising. But yeah, I'm pretty sure there are a bunch of people out there running Precise. Like, you can look at stats for some of the PPAs, popular PPAs, and some people who run PPAs can see the stats for their Precise packages.
Stats for PPAs?
Yeah, there are stats for PPAs. You can
Is that
see
a thing?
Download numbers. Yeah, you can see download numbers in your PPAs.
We're going to have to cover that in an episode at some point. I had no idea that was a thing.
I'm pretty sure it's just a number on a web page. It's not super interesting.
Well, depends what your PPA's got in it, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, that's true. I don't know how long you can spin that out as a news story.
Well, okay.
Yeah, okay. But
do you want to see how mate people are using your Ubuntu Mate spyware?
Oh, shh, don't tell them about the spyware.
But there is this extended maintenance, isn't there, for server installs that we mentioned previously. Dustin blogged about the extended support program for 12.04 for people who are really sticky on it and don't want to move off it.
And only servers qualify for extended support maintenance or whatever it's called. Come on, Alan, give us some good news.
So the Ubuntu Budgie project, which is the most recent addition to the set of Ubuntu flavors, have published a financial statement, which is interesting because I don't think I've seen one of these before from Ubuntu Budgie because they're so new. This is their first one. And it's got some details about, how much money they had in the bank, what they used the money for, and where their income is coming from, both individual PayPal donators and people who are using Patreon. And I was expecting to see, people have been throwing money at the project because lots of people seem to be talking about it and it seems super popular. And I was quite surprised, how low the amount of money in the bank was. And I guess the people who run the project are funding a lot of this out of their own pockets. And so that's why they don't have giant reserves of money. And maybe people aren't donating as much as we hoped.
Yeah. I think I'm meeting some of the Ubuntu Budgie team at Linux Fest Northwest later this week, so maybe I'll share some.
To share the
ideas
secret
about,
to your success.
Well, I don't know I've had any success as such, but I'll try and help them gather some more funds. It looks like they're following a similar idea as well, where they're actually offering surplus to developers to help with work that they need doing, which is always good to see.
Yeah, but I like the transparency. I like the fact they publish this stuff and
absolutely.
let people know. So you know what their financial situation is, and if you want to donate to the Ubuntu Budgie project, I can't even say it, Ubuntu Budgie project, then you can do so to help lift their figures up.
Next, we have a blog that was written by a colleague of ours called Ogra, and he described how to use Ubuntu Core to create a Wi-Fi access point with Nextcloud server embedded on a Pi 3 in mere minutes.
It's pretty cool being able to purpose a Pi and chuck a couple of snaps on there and you're pretty much done. There's not an awful lot to getting it working. I was quite impressed with that. It's actually, the blog post probably takes longer to read than it does to actually, do.
I think it probably does take longer. I like the wireless access point piece because I've tinkered with something similar. So when we were at MWC, one of our other colleagues, Luke, told us that OpenWRT is a snap that you can install on Ubuntu Core.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So you run up your Ubuntu Core image on a Raspberry Pi 3.
Yeah.
You then snap install OpenWRT, and you have all that OpenWRT goodness in a snap. And I've experimented with that, creating a wireless access point and a simple router and all the rest of it. But this guide from Ogra uses a different snap, which is just called Wi-Fi AP. And then he outlines how to fire off the necessary configuration to actually start it up. So similar outcome, but a different way of achieving it. And I liked seeing that difference because OpenWRT was a bit too much for what I was trying to do. So I'm going to revisit this, I think.
What I thought was fun, the demos that Luke had at MWC, he had one of the big orange boxes. And, that's interesting in and of itself because the orange boxes are quite cool. People would come up and look at the orange box. But on top of it, he had 2 Raspberry Pis in little cases. And one of the Pis had Ubuntu Core with, as Martin says, OpenWRT as a snap. And the other one was the other way round. It was running OpenWRT with snap support. So you could
for extensions and stuff.
Yeah. So you could snap install, you wouldn't, but you could snap install Nextcloud on top of OpenWRT, or the other way around. You could have Ubuntu Core and install OpenWRT on top of that. It was pretty cool. And people coming over, once he explained that, it was like, wow. Yeah. It was pretty awesome. Anyway, moving on.
Ubuntu GNOME has proposed dropping 32-bit support after 1804 LTS. Which is interesting. Well, considering that Ubuntu GNOME is now going to be just Ubuntu after 1804 LTS.
So this actually is a little bit old, and I put it in there because I thought it was interesting because we've talked about this whole dropping 32-bit support is a recurrent thing that keeps coming up. But the thing that I thought was interesting was the fact that how, whatever discussions or plans they had just a month ago might be changed by the change in direction that Canonical are having with Ubuntu. How, that could, completely put the stop on that. If, they might say we don't want to do 32-bit support anymore, but it might be that Canonical has a bunch of customers who are like, no, we need that. Please continue doing that, or, a vocal community who want it to carry on. And so it may well carry on after 1804. We'll yet to see, really.
So there's links in the show notes to that. And Jeremy's got a very pragmatic write-up as the whys and wherefores why they were considering this. And it's not at all sensational like some of the let's drop 32-bit support. It's very sensible. Have we got some events, Mark?
Events, yes, we have one event, in fact. We have the 2017 Ohio Linux Fest, which is looking for presentations on Friday and Saturday of September That's the 29th, Friday and Saturday, which is the 29th and 30th of September. So we will have a link to their call for papers page in our show notes for full details about submitting a proposal. The deadline is Friday, the 14th of July, but the sooner you can submit a talk, the better.
Fantastic.
And I think that's all the news and events we have time for this week.
Are you a freedom-hating iTunes user? Redeem yourself by helping spread the word about Ubuntu and open source. Leave a rating to tell others what you think of the Ubuntu podcast.
That's it.
No, it's not it. That's not it. No, that's not it. I made a mistake.
Move on. That's all for episode 9. We'll be back next week when we'll be discussing OMG ! Ubuntu ! And we'll bring you some GUI love, which will be cool.
Awesome.
So we'll see you next time. Joey, you're coming back next week, aren't you?
Can I wait?
I hope so. It's going to be a short episode. Yeah, good.
Well, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time. And yes, ask you loads of questions about OMG.
Brace yourself.
Awesome.
Right.
Cool. Thanks for listening, everyone. Goodbye.
See you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Do I stop recording on audio recorder?